And Paula Evans and Ruth Rockwell and myself, and I guess Paula's going to tell us about her mother and father who wrote the book Fairhope. Blanche and Paula Alyea, is that those are the names? Alyea? Alyea. Okay. So go ahead, Paula, and tell us how they got started on that.
Well, my father spent several winters here as a child. His parents would come south for the winter, and he and his younger brother were enrolled in Organic School of Education. And he fell in love with Fairhope then, and always vowed he would come back to live, or at least when he retired. My first trip to Fairhope was when in the Christmas I was 4, and my parents and grandparents and I came down and visited my great-grandmother who was living here at that time.
Oh, and who was that?
Her last name was Holmes. My grandmother Alyea was maiden name was Holmes, and my great-grandmother lived in the pretty column, 2-story house on the corner of Bayview and Magnolia. And
Foster.
yes, and she was living there at that time. And my only recollection of that visit, of course, was the Colonial Inn where we stayed. And
Well, tell us, back up a little bit.
All right.
Excuse me for interrupting you,
Sure.
but how'd your grandmother get here?
Now, you know that I really don't know. I was going right by that. I don't know. I assumed that she had come down with my grandparents on many trips, and as she got older, decided that the climate was better for her here.
Okay.
And we stayed at the Colonial Inn. That's really all I remember, except that the Colonial Inn was in its heyday at that time. This would have been in the very early 30s. And they had a Christmas party for the children of all the employees, and I was invited to attend, and I was the only white child there, and we just had a wonderful time. My father always said that he was going to write a book about Fairhope, and eventually in the 50s the opportunity arose from the University of Alabama Press, and he and Mother spent a great deal of time researching. Mother read every courier, every line in every courier, from Des Moines on to Fairhope.
Wow.
And she did that research while my father did other parts, and they spent the summer down here in '52, and that's where we'll let Bruce take up.
Well, they invited us to come down and spend our vacation there, and I caught the only fish I ever caught in my life. And I don't know, we enjoyed ourselves and liked the town. About 100 miles up the road, I told Paula, I says, you know, if I can find a job down there, I think I'll move to Fairhope. And she said, well, you find a job and I'll do the packing. And so then I heard about they were looking for somebody to work in the office there, and I wrote them a letter, and they said, come down, and we did.
Oh, you worked in the single tax office?
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
About 10 years.
Great. I didn't realize it was that long.
I stayed there till I decided to go teach at Murphy.
Uh-huh. Okay. All right.
And while I was working there, I decided I wanted to be a member, and I couldn't afford it. So they let me apply and took $10 a month out of my pay till my $100 was paid up.
Oh my. Okay. So it looks like they could have thrown that in for free after all.
They don't do that.
Well, I guess not.
I was quite amused when I read about they called this guy in here to teach a class on single tax and paid him $2,500.
Oh my.
They used to give me a $100 Christmas bonus if I teach a class.
Times have changed.
Yeah, I should say.
Oh.
I didn't know you got paid for teaching a class.
Yeah, that's the way, if I didn't teach it, I didn't get a $100 bonus at Christmas.
Well, that was an incentive anyhow. Well, I remember back in the 50s when your folks started to write the book, and I remember they called my father because his father had been one of the founders.
Yes.
And they certainly did their research. They must have
Yes,
contacted
they
them.
really did. They spent hours and hours and hours researching everything, and thoroughly enjoyed it. And he had always said he would retire here, and of course then after he retired from the university, they moved here.
And when did he retire from the university?
64, I believe.
Did he ever think about writing anything else on later developments of Fairhope, or did he write anything? He may have written a paper.
No, as I remember, he did not. He lived about 10 years after they retired here, but he had emphysema and he was in poor health. And he always hoped someone else would come along and take up where he left off and do a definitive history, continuing history. Good. Wonderful. But because he felt the need to continue that. But of course, he had to stop someplace, and that's where he stopped there.
Yeah, I've been trying to get Ruth to do it, but
I wish she would.
I think that'd be great.
Maybe if I get settled a little bit. Upsets in the
Okay.
last 2-3 years.
And Paula, you have been a teacher in Fairhope Public School
Yes,
for...
I taught in Fairhope 29 of my 30 teaching years. Had a few years in the elementary school, which I thoroughly enjoyed, until they found out I was qualified to teach economics at the high school. And so they moved me up there. And I enjoyed that too.
I taught 3 weeks.
Oh,
I taught her classes when she was in the hospital.
aha, very good. It's nice to have your own substitute.
Well, it was nice. And we'd see someone on the streets after that, and they would speak to both of us by name. And after they left, Bruce said, "Yours, mine, or ours?" Because he had many Murphy graduates living over here by that time.
Yeah. Did you teach economics at Murphy, or what did you teach?
Taught marketing.
Taught what?
Marketing.
Marketing. Oh yeah.
I was a coordinator in distributive education. It was a co-op class, but all our classroom work was marketing or statistics.
Well, Paula, tell us about the changes in the high school while you were there. Or, yeah, I guess it was high school.
Well, just in growth. The first year I taught at the high school was the graduating class of 62. I taught all the seniors and one class of juniors. And I would assume by 70, I could not teach all the seniors. We had
So
another
many.
teacher teaching just 1 or 2 classes, and I had the rest of them. And now they have, well, before I retired, we have another teacher who thoroughly enjoyed teaching government but despised economics. And so we switched students at semester. So we had, in essence, 10 classes of seniors, plus another class of those who wanted to take advanced.
So that must have been about 300 seniors at that time.
Easily.
Yeah.
And my Paula graduated in 72, and there was about 300 in her class.
Yes.
Yeah, that was Rob's class too.
I had some very good, some very interesting students over the years.
Can you remember any, not mentioning any names, but can you remember any incidents that might be humorous or of note?
Oh, well, quite a few, I imagine. Not mentioning names might be difficult.
Oh dear.
But it was interesting and it was fun.
When she was in the hospital and I was teaching, Valentine Day came up. And one of the classes sent me a singing Valentine. The only thing I can remember now, the last 2 lines. When you leave, it'll break our heart. Yes, when you leave, it sure smart.
I do remember one not terribly flattering incident. When Bruce was still working at the colony office, they were trying to devise a program so that he could come and talk to students on the theories of Henry George, and also on a little bit about the history of Fairhope. And
All in 1 hour.
oh, well, yes.
Oh, wonderful.
A compact situation here. But the day he was scheduled to come, I was ill, and so he went without me. And the next day, one of my students in one of my classes said, "Have you ever considered staying home and letting Mr. Evans teach all the time?" would have.
Okay. Well, anything else you remember about Fairhope? Some of the changes that you've seen occur, or anything that might be
So
significant?
just a few things that I missed. I think it was, if I may use the word, a quaint little town when we moved here in '54, and I loved it for that. And I was very much taken with the outdoor movie theater we had.
We both missed that.
Yes. And everybody would come, including the cats. I remember one couple brought their monkey a lot. He was on a leash.
I never saw him down there.
Oh yes, we did several times. Everyone smelled of oil citronella.
Yeah, keep the bugs away.
Right.
Got maybe a mosquito
Well,
bite
just
down
a
there.
lot of fun things then.
Yeah.
And I think we've developed into a perfectly beautiful small city. But I
Mhm.
still miss some of the old Fairhope aspects.
Yeah.
It's too much like a suburb of Mobile now.
Yeah. It's becoming a rich man's town, I'm afraid.
Yes, it
Rich
is.
person's
It
town.
is. It is.
Although one thing I hardly approve of was someone that expressed it. Every time we have a problem, Major Nick says plant some flower on top of it.
It's a beautiful city. I guess we've had some problems.
I do love flowers.
Oh, yeah, we all enjoy those. Okay, well, if you think of anything else, spit it out.
Can't really think of anything.
Okay, well, we'll
That's-
just,
Well,
You got some
I
questions?
I think they ought to tell about, what Paul and
Yeah, that's-
Rocky did, and, I mean, what they were like as people.
Oh, well,
I let her tell me that.
I think they were wonderful parents. I really do. I was encouraged always to think for myself. And my father,
what was his profession?
he was a professor, full professor at the University of Alabama. He taught economics, public finance, and corporate finance. And he became very interested early on in taxation, and eventually, before he retired, was president of the National Tax Association.
Yeah, we got a vacation in Denver out of that.
Oh, that was worthwhile.
They had a convention there, and we went along. But
And your mother, did she work, or did she just
she
help
no,
out?
she did not work. She had a degree from the University of Illinois, a major in accounting and a minor in philosophy, which I always thought was a rather strange combination. But it worked for her. She never worked outside the home, but my father wrote a great many research books for different corporations and state governments and whatnot on taxation. Did one on Alabama's tax system, and she worked with him on those and did all of the proofreading and that sort of thing. I go to bed at night listening to them say, mother reading out loud and telling where the commas were and the sentences and the apostrophes and all of these things. And one day when I was in junior high school, I was asked to read aloud the following day, so I did, with all of the commas and quotation marks, exclamation points. And the teacher says, "Let me guess, your father's writing another book."
Oh, that's pretty good.
But we had a lot of fun as a family.
I've always described her mother as a gentle mother-in-law.
A gentle?
Mhm.
Okay, that's good. That's good to have.
Bruce, you might do a little description of what you did and the sort of atmosphere and when you were working at the college.
Well, we just had that one little part that is now the, where you vote. That's all we
Library.
had. That's all we had for the whole thing. And I collected all the money for rent and posted to the books and made out the monthly report and the annual report on what we spent and what we hadn't spent. what we wish we had to spend. And I was trying to learn the rent formula, but somehow or another, Corny wasn't a very good teacher. I was a lousy student because I never did learn how to compute rent on anything. But the job that I despise more than anything else is that only about 10% of the people call up at tax time and tell us what improvements they've made. And I had to get that damn book out and call them again and again and again and again. And still we'd wind up with some of them and have to charge them everything instead of any deductions because they just wouldn't call.
You mean there was no tax assessor?
Well, we did the assessment for the tax assessor.
I see, okay.
And
And so you had needed individuals, leaseholders to call you to tell you what their property was.
they were supposed to call me. I called them.
Yeah. And that's the way it goes. Nobody wants to fess up.
And I also taught classes in, I graduated from the New York School, Henry George School in New York, and was designated as a teacher. And I taught classes about 5 years.
Here, you're talking
During that time, tell about the competition at the high school for a scholarship.
Oh yeah, we dreamed up an idea of any high school student at either one of the schools, the organic school or the high school, could write an essay on single tax. I've forgotten how long it had to be, but who was that guy in Memphis who gave us
Abe Waldow.
Abe who?
Waldow.
Abe Waldow.
He was a lawyer that had been interested in the colony for a long time.
3 years that we had those classes, and then the essay contest. They had to come to school first before they could enter the contest, come to my school. And he gave them a scholarship to the winner for 3 years. And by the way, the young lady who's now married to my insurance agent, Roland Gooden's daughter, she went to school 2 years on that scholarship.
Nita. Yeah. Okay. And what school was this? Or was it to any school?
Do you remember, Ruth?
No,
Is it Memphis State?
No, they could go. Well, let's see. I
Seemed to
thought
me
it was
Nancy
Vanderbilt.
Dealey went there.
Was it Vanderbilt? It was in Tennessee, I think.
It was a school in Tennessee, but I
That's
don't remember
where
the exact school.
Abe lived.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that's where it was. I know.
Seemed to me Nancy Dealey James.
Nancy Dealey.
And I think she went to Memphis State, but now I'm not
I
positive.
believe
about
so.
that.
Yeah.
And Phil Porter won one of the scholarships.
That was a good thing to do. Is the colony doing that now? I've been away, so.
No, I don't believe so.
Well, we gave cash prizes for the first, second, and third winners, and then they came out in scholarship also.
But about the time I guess about the time you left, they quit doing that, or maybe before. I don't remember exactly.
Well, those contests were never, in my estimation, a success. We never got any large group to attend. They were all willing to come in and write an essay, but they didn't want to take the course first.
But how are they going to know what single tax is about if they didn't take the course?
I have no idea whatsoever, but that was a problem.
Yeah. Okay.
Hope you like background music.
Yeah, don't you? He wants to have his say.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, any more questions, Ruth?
Well, there's a lot of questions. You might tell about the time Cordy came in and sat there with his hat on.
One morning, I everything straightened out, ready to go to work, and Coney came in and sat down and said, "Good morning." Coney says, "Good morning." And he had his hat on. And so I says, "Coney, you didn't hang your hat up." "I know it." "Well, why not? I like it this way." I said, "Oh, come off it, Coney." I said, "What happened?" "Well, what had happened was he'd gone to visit some new friends, and by the door,
Was our house.
Was
It
your
was
house?
David's house. We were all at David's house.
it was just a piece of plate glass just about the side of the door, and Coney walked through it.
Oh, my
Had to take 6 stitches in his head up here.
Oh, my gracious.
And I said, "Well, Coney, let me have your hat. I'll hang it up for you." He said, "I think I'll wear it." I said, "Well, Coney, that's not reasonable." He said, "Well, I don't want anybody asking me why I got this cut on my head." I said, Don't you think they're going to ask you why you're wearing your cotton picking hat?" I finally got him to take it off, and then it got funny to him. Every time anybody come in, he'd give them blow-by-blow description.
Little side thing about that was when Paula was the baby, and she was there in a stroller, and she had been sitting right beside that window, that glass window, and just minutes before he came, Linda, Oliver's little girl, had walked over and pushed her around the room and left her across the room. If she had been there, that would have, of course, he might have seen her and not bumped it too.
So she might have been shattered with glass if she'd have stayed there.
And we all sat there with our mouths hanging open.
Watching him go through the glass.
You know, it just seemed so unreal, like something that wasn't happening.
Goodness. Okay. Go ahead and tell us about your daughter. Where is she now? And
She and her husband and one daughter live in Montgomery.
also your grandparents.
Oh, yes.
Congratulations.
Our granddaughter is a senior in high school this year.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes.
That doesn't seem possible.
No, it doesn't, but she's very talented and is a dancer, and she's hopes to get a scholarship and pursue dancing and education. Apparently the coming field is in the fine arts for pilot schools, for grammar schools, and she would like to teach dancing at grammar school.
What branch of dancing is she?
Oh, well, all of them, ballet and jazz and tap.
You can pick them up and put them down. You can do it any way you want to, I guess.
I guess so.
We brought her here when she was 3. She had her 3rd birthday here, right?
You're back on Janie now, the daughter, yes. Janie had her 3rd birthday in our little house we built, Mom Dick Dyson built for us on Orange Street. And she went to Huntington, as did her husband. And until last week, they owned a sporting goods store in Montgomery, and they recently sold the sporting goods store. And they said they wanted a life again. 6 days a week and several nights during hunting season.
Oh, wow.
They were really tired of all that.
Yeah, she told me that she said she was tired of people up there making money off her bringing. And I said, "Well, why don't you buy the thing?" And she did.
Yeah, she was manager of the store before Dan, and they owned it for about 8 years, and then they decided that was enough of a good thing, and so they sold it just Friday.
Okay. Well, we thank you very much for, excuse me, your comments. And do you want to talk about your father's 3 years during the war? That you say he had.
When Pearl Harbor was bombed and war was declared, he thought the first thing he ought to do was try to get more of the services. Well, he was too young for World War I, and as it turned out, he was too old for World War II. And so then he applied to the government agencies and was accepted by OPA, Office of Price Administration. They had mostly economists from throughout the country working there, and he was reacquainted and united with several of his classmates from the University of Illinois. And he thoroughly enjoyed that. And then later they transferred him to smaller war plants. And by the end of the war, he was director of contract termination, and he flew around the various parts of the country to help owners of smaller war plants convert back to peacetime production, because they could see that the war was coming to an end.
And then had he been at the University of Alabama before that?
Oh yes, we moved to Alabama in '33, I believe.
And so then he did that for.
And he did that until '45, and then by the end of the war, when things were winding down, he had offers from government and from private industry, and but he decided what he really wanted to do was go back to university and teach.
Okay.
And so then he was there then until he retired in either 62 or 64.
Okay, thank you very much.